Prayers.
Let us pray. Most gracious God, author of all good things, we humbly beseech thee for the Parliament of Barbados, especially the Senate at this time assembled, that thou wouldst be pleased to direct and prosper all their counsels, to the advancement of thy glory, the good of thy church, and the safety, honor, and welfare of all people. All this we ask in the name of Jesus Christ, our most blessed Lord and Savior. Amen. We continue to pray for God's protection during this hurricane season. Loving God, maker of heaven and earth, protect us in your love and mercy. Send the Spirit of Jesus to be with us, to still our fears and give us confidence. In the stormy waters, Jesus reassured his disciples by his presence, calm any storm and strengthen their faith. Guard us from harm during this hurricane season and renew our faith to serve you faithfully. Give us the courage to face all difficulties and the wisdom to see the ways your Spirit binds us together in mutual assistance. With confidence, we make our prayer through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. O Lord our God, who are the lover of justice and truth, give thy grace to our Parliament and all who direct the affairs of our nation, and guide them by the Holy Spirit. We beseech thee that by word and deed they may promote the well-being of your people and set forward peace among all peoples, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Together the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. And may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all now and forever. Amen.
The Senate is in session.
Messages from Her Excellency the President. Announcements by Your Honor the President.
Minutes of our meeting held on Wednesday, 4th June 2025 for deferral. Senator Cummings.
Mr. President, I'd like to move that the aforementioned minutes be deferred at this time.
The question is that the minutes of the meeting held on June 4th, 2025 be deferred. Those honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. The next ayes have it. Those minutes are accordingly deferred. I received the annual report of the Ombudsman for the period 2020 to 2022 and for the year 2023. These are required according to Section 13(6) of the Ombudsman Act, Cap A of the Laws of Barbados, to be laid before each House of Parliament. And this communication lays those matters before us. In terms of attendance today, we have excuses of absence from Senator Malalou, who continues to recover, Senator Nurse, who's overseas, and Senator, the Most Honourable Dr. Jerome Walcott. Take this opportunity as well as announcements in congratulating our own Senator Dr. Drakes, Crystal Drakes, for the publication, along with her co-author, Mr. Clish Giddens, of, I believe it was the first book, the first of many, I would presume, but a wonderful publication. Congratulations to you, Senator Dr. Drakes. Also, we have announcements, indications of lateness from Senator Kevin Boyce and Senator Andreli Boyce.
Presentation of petitions, presentation of papers, reports from select committees, questions to ministers, requests for leave to move the adjournment of the Senate on matters of urgent public importance, statements by ministers or parliamentary secretaries, personal explanations, motions relating to the business or sittings of the Senate moved by a minister, introduction of bills.
Senator Cummings.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice of the following items: the Health Services Medical Reports Fees and Validation Bill of 2025. I also give notice of the resolution to approve, in accordance with Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Cap 225, the vesting in the NHC of a parcel of land described in the schedule at Quarterly in the parish of Christchurch for housing development, and also a second resolution to approve, in accordance with Section 5 as well, the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Cap 225, the lease to the Barbados Association for Cancer Advocacy of property at Quarterly in the same parish in Christchurch for the purpose of building of a hospice and palliative care facility for terminally ill under the terms and conditions of the schedule. Mr. President, I also beg to move the first reading of the Health Services Medical Reports Fees Validation Bill of 2025.
The question is that the Health Services Medical Reports Fees Validation Bill 2025 be read a first time. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The next ayes have it. The bill is accordingly read a first time.
Public business, sir.
Public business is now the order of the day.
Order number 8, sir. In the name of the Honourable Leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Road Traffic Amendment Bill, Amendment number 2 Bill 2025.
Senator Cummings.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I rise to introduce this bill, order number 8. The title of the bill, Mr. President, perhaps is erroneous. It says the bill would amend the Road Traffic Act, Cap 2295, to empower the minister to prescribe the cases in which a person may discharge his liability for contravention of regulations made under the Act through the payment of a penalty administratively and the remediation of the contravention. When you go into the actual amendment that is being made at Section 2, it is a short amendment which has generated quite a bit of conversation. It specifically relates to the insertion of a new section 121A into the Cap 295, and the amendment is made as follows. This section applies to such regulations as the minister may prescribe, notwithstanding any other provision of this act. The minister may, by regulations, prescribe the circumstances in which a person who, through the contravention of any regulations to which this section applies, commits an offence, may be offered an opportunity to discharge that liability which would arise out of a conviction for the offence by 1, at Section A, the payment of an initial penalty of $500, B, the payment of a further penalty of $10 for every day or part thereof of a day that the contravention continues, and C, the remediation of the contravention. This is the short amendment that is proposed that has generated quite a bit of discussion. Now, Mr. President, I want to begin by going after, on the front foot, what this bill is not. This bill is not a crime-fighting measure. This bill is not a part of the arsenal. This has never been proposed by the Office of the Attorney General. The origins of this bill, as made clear by the Honourable Attorney General in public and in the other place, it is for the purpose of protecting the police of this country. The police have asked for this amendment to be made, and for a very good reason. Now, Mr. President, I am not aware of any circumstances under which at 11 o'clock in the night, when it is pitch black in some communities, if I hear a rustling outside my door, a rustling outside my window or my gate, I call any of the honourable senators in this chamber. I am not aware, Mr. President, I know I can call you, thank you, Mr. President. I am not aware, Mr. President, of any circumstances where, as was seen in Belmont Road, just up the road, that elderly gentleman who was robbed on the side of the road, if any members of the public call any of the honourable members of this place or the other place. I am not aware of any circumstance, Mr. President, where, as we saw horrifically on the front page of our Sunday Sun newspaper, that a 70-year-old woman over 70 years old, taking her dog out to use the restroom at night, calls after what happened to her happened, that she or her grandson or her relatives would call any leader of the opposition or call the Prime Minister. Those are not the calls that we make in response to crime. When something happens, whether it is in the heights or the terraces or in urban communities that feel as though things happen in one place versus the other, the calls that we make as a people are to one agency, the police. We call the police for anything that goes wrong in this country, and rightfully so. The police then, Mr. President, have a duty and a responsibility as emblazoned on their cars as we see them whizzing past us, responding to emergencies, to serve and to protect. They respond to crime. They don't respond, Mr. President, when things go well. They respond when things don't go well. They respond to prevent things, Mr. President, from going badly. So on some occasions, I remember one time I was somewhere and there were people hanging out there and I was going home and somebody said, "You passing through this particular road? Don't pass out there tonight." That road, particularly dark, known for all kinds of activity, and the police were in that street that night having undertaken an operation. They don't come only when the light comes up, when the sun comes up. In the dead of the night, Mr. President, they respond to crime. They respond to prevent crime, and I'm taking my time to go through this deliberately. Most of the people complaining or raising concerns about tint are not the ones who receive the calls to protect or to respond to issues. It is the policemen, the uncles, the aunts, the brothers, the husbands, the boyfriends, in some instances the grandfathers, who leave their families home every single day and go out on these streets to protect us. They leave their families home knowing full well that it only takes one idiot on any given day that prevents them from going back home to their loved ones. That's a fact. Their families have reconciled themselves to the fact that something can happen in any given day that prevents policemen from coming home at night. So this measure, when the police raised it with the office of the executive, they came and they said, in the context of national security, there are a number of things we are seeing. Among the things we are seeing on the ground, we are seeing more and more vehicles that we are approaching in the dead of the night, or sometimes in the middle of the day. We who want to get home to our families just like all of us, we who have a responsibility to serve all of us, are uncomfortable with the existing contravention of laws which already exist on our books. There are already laws on our books that prescribe how dark your windows are not supposed to be. It is not new. It's always been there. And because we've been doing the wrong thing for a long time, does not mean it becomes the right thing. It doesn't make wrong right. And so the laws have always been there. In fact, the penalties have also always been there. What is being introduced now is a mechanism to measure what's dark and what is not. What is too dark and what is not. And the police came and they said, some of the vehicles that we have to approach, like the ones that I was talking about in the dead of the night when I was leaving one place to go to the next, and the police were saying something happening in a particular area, you may want to avoid that area. When we are home in our beds, in the safety of our beds, sleeping behind our wrought iron bars, and they're outside protecting us, some of these windows are too dark. And when we approach a vehicle in the dead of the night, worse yet, but it can happen in the day, we can't see what we are approaching. We have no idea what's on the inside. And as a measure to protect the people who protect us, this measure is before this Honourable Chamber today as it was in the other place. Mr. President, over the last couple of days, I've spent a lot of time standing up by the side of the road, dealing with different matters. I must tell you, I said to a policeman, the policemen, they were there and they were assisting. You know, sometimes you don't know until you don't know. You don't know that you don't know. No, I don't interact with the police all the time. I don't have to see some of the things that they see. I was blown away, Mr. President, by how indisciplined a society we are in so many instances. I was blown away by how indisciplined we are. I was blown away by how little regard some Barbadians have for anything in authority. I was blown away by it. I had to ask the policeman or the policeman there, is normal? I was so confused. I was confused by the number of people who physically move barricades to pass through them. And I don't mean physically move a caution tape because they did that. Physically taking caution tape and stepping over it or ducking under it. Moving physical barricades out of the way to pass. And then if you move the caution tape and you move the physical barricade and a policeman tell you not left but right, you got issue. How we got there? I was surprised, Mr. President, by the number of people who police gave legitimate instructions to who ignored it and went about their business. We talk in this country all the time about the behavior of certain types of drivers and certain categories of drivers on the road. Mr. President, I saw so much of that on the road. And you would imagine, you know, when you grew up, certainly in the Barbados that I grew up in, it only took a look, a side eye. Your mother, your father, or any adult with authority in your life, and you stop in your tracks and what you were going to do, you don't do because you don't know. That's the rod of correction. Barbados doesn't seem to function in that space anymore. Not as widespread as you would expect it to. And so the police are dealing with a category of persons out there, hopefully in the minority and not in the majority, who think that they can do as they feel. They have no respect for authority. They do not feel as though the rules that bind the rest of us also bind them. They live a lifestyle in some instances of either death or jail, and they're not bothered by who they take down with them. And it only takes one situation to go badly, where our policemen on the front line are protecting our people, our communities, and our country. encounter somebody who feels as if they have nothing to lose and they open fire on a police vehicle or on a policeman as he approaches a vehicle. And all the government has said to the police service who asked for this amendment is, okay. Okay. Because we are not out there with you. You are out there. You are protecting Barbadians. And if Barbadians are concerned, Mr. President, about crime, if Barbadians are concerned about what they are seeing on the streets, either with gun violence or recent stabbings that we have seen, then it is only logical that right-thinking Barbadians also understand that the same category of criminal that they are concerned by on the one hand, they have to also put all the protective mechanisms in place for policemen. Policemen walk around. You remember there was a song of Calypso, boots, the government boots, arm the police. There was another song that we had, Mr. President. Then there were all of these songs, po, arm the police, because at the time, however long ago, people were concerned about how you were going to position the police to respond to increasing crime. All the way back there, the government boots. Mr. President, all the way back there were concerns about police wearing bulletproof vests. You make sure that the teams who are going into hot spots have the necessary protective equipment. In order to avoid accidents on the road, police vehicles carry sirens. Move, be coming through, get out of the way. But have you noticed, Mr. President, how many Barbadians do not respond to sirens anymore? Even in the response to a siren, either from a police vehicle or an ambulance, the indiscipline exists. And so the lack of regard in some quarters for law and order is what has necessitated, in the same way that police carry weapons to protect themselves, they wear bulletproof vests to protect themselves. In some instances, they go in and they have operations that they're structured with the special weapons and ammunition. They have the CID, they have the task force, they have the differently trained officers to do different things. Equally so, one of the measures is making sure that they can make eye contact and they can see inside of vehicles that they and they alone have to approach, Mr. President. That's what this is about. But what we have heard is that the government wants tint. It is not about tint on its own. Mr. President, when each of us drives through that gate to come into these environments of Parliament, who stops us at the gate? The police. In many instances, they know our car numbers by now. So they know it's us and they can see us. But if by chance, as I this morning came in a vehicle that was not mine, and the windows had to be rolled on, the police can't look through the windows and can't see it is me, Senator Cummings, who's leader of government business, and she come into the Senate, I had to roll down the window in the passenger seat I was in so the police could recognize it was me. But if the windows are up and the tint is too dark, they don't know who it is. They can't see inside. And so, Mr. President, the focus on a penalty, which is civil versus criminal, is where I want to take us next. Now, Mr. President, there are people who have their tint on for all the wrong reasons. This is to weed that out. But there are people who, because it has not been enforced for an extended period of time, and we've always been doing the wrong thing, let it be clear, we have always been doing the wrong thing because the legislation always existed. Because we have always had this wrong thing going on, some people's windows were tinted because they liked it. They preferred it. Fellow won't go and check your girl, but the Indian main girl is an outside girl, and so he ain't really want nobody to see who in the car, that kind of thing. So we've gotten away with doing some things. People do that sort of thing? People do that sort of thing. Shocking. Yeah. So for all kinds of reasons, people have followed the wrong thing. How many times you were driving down a road, Mr. President, and you see is a one-way street, but it became custom that people were going in both directions. And because it became customary more and more people started doing it. It doesn't mean it's no longer a one-way street. And so many people continue to tint their cars dark. Is the government then going to criminalize a person who does the wrong thing because customarily it has been allowed to happen? Or is the government going to seek to ensure that a penalty is applied as a disincentive? And then equally so, make sure that for those purposes and for those persons who do it for the wrong reason, that you are stopped by the police and it is corrected. My mother told me this morning when I was leaving the house that she, in anticipation of the legislation, she went by her tint guy and carried her car. And she looked at me and she said, my tint is the right tint. She said they had a machine, a piece of equipment that they put on my window and they ran it down and it came within the prescribed parameters. That is the reason, Mr. President, the tint legislation as it has come to be known has been delayed. Because the Attorney General said, okay, the police asked for the tint, we understand the reason you asked for the tint, we can give the tint, we're going to agree with what you want to do, we'll put it in place, we will move to enforce the legislation with a civil penalty, but there has to be an independent way of assessing what is dark versus too dark. And so, Mr. President, he wanted to make sure that the mechanism that allows you to measure what is too dark was on island and that the police force was not looking at it and guessing and saying, Senator Drakes, your windows are too dark, even though they may look as though they're the same as mine. When in actual fact, they may be the same. They wanted to have an objective way of measuring what was to be defined as too dark. And so the tint meters, as you have heard them referred to, is there for the purpose of making that assessment. You're not putting something in place that you cannot then implement. And so that's where the tint meters came in. So first point, this is about protecting the police. Secondly, in protecting the police, it is also not about criminalizing persons who do the wrong thing but are not themselves criminals. That is why there is a penalty as opposed to a criminal conviction as a consequence. Because I am not sure that Senator Drakes, who is a girl that I like, would look good in prison colors. I'm not sending her there at all, Mr. President. So I'm not sending her to Dodds for the reason a tint on her window. And I am certain that in as much as Barbadians have talked about it, if people were getting locked up at taxpayer expense and being fed and watered up in Dodds over tint, we would have heard even more of a hue and a cry. Not so, Mr. President, that is what I think. And so the purpose of the penalty is to serve as a civil response to doing the wrong thing. Now, what has been, however, the report of the Office of the Attorney General. Now, Mr. President, I want to take the remaining portion of my time to present this bill to talk about what has actually been done, because I want to separate out a measure to protect the people who serve us and to keep them safe on the road, Mr. President, from the measures that have been taken to treat to overall crime in this country, Mr. President. Now, the Office of the Attorney General, early this year, as a matter of fact, in their own estimates presentation in the other place, spoke about what they were doing. Now, for the police, Mr. President, the police, we have seen in 2008, Mr. President, and I'm going to draw from the estimates of expenditure in the appropriations bills for the last several years, certainly since this government was in power and before. When this government came to office, Mr. President, in 2008, we had an allocation to the police. By 2019, which would have been the first financial year that this government was in office, we had an allocation of $107 million being allocated to the police service. In 2020, 2021, it was a similar allocation. By 2021, COVID notwithstanding, that allocation increased to $114 million. And then that had an additional supplementary amount added of $3.85 million. In this financial year, Mr. President, we have reached the historic high. There has never been an allocation to the Barbados Police Service as high as it has been in the financial year 2025-2026. In the financial year 2025 to 2026, an allocation of $145 million has been assigned to the Barbados Police Service. That this government, this administration has prioritized investing in and supporting the Barbados Police Service is made clear. We put our money where our mouth is. We put the money into the Barbados Police Service. It is an increase, Mr. President, over the previous years before this government, and I'm not going to go into it in any details for deliberate reasons, Mr. President, but certainly between 2018 and 2025, this government has consistently increased the allocation to the Barbados Police Service until we reach a high of $145 million, up from $118 million in 2018. In terms of the legislation supporting this government, supporting the judicial system, Mr. President, we have seen also that the number of judges originally assigned to manage civil, family, and criminal cases moved from 2 judges originally to up to 8 dedicated to criminal trials only, Mr. President. And that has been accompanied by measures in the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, where we have moved from having just 8 prosecutors, Mr. President, to now having 20 prosecutors in the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. So when the police do their work, when they use the allocation assigned to them, we also now see, Mr. President, the allocation being assigned to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. I want to show, Mr. President, through the estimates of expenditure also, I'm trying to get to the page. Actually, I'm drawing from the Appropriations Bill, estimates of expenditure 2025-2026, Mr. President. It is captured there in the big book. That's what we call it, and some people call it the big book. Mr. President, in that document, you will see the allocations, and you'll also see how we have treated to the matters relating to cases, how monies have been allocated to different levels of the police service. I'm just trying to get my hand, here it is. So, Mr. President, in 2023-2024, under the Office of Director of Public Prosecutions for the period January to December 2023. Now, I've lived in another Caribbean country, Jamaica in particular. But, Mr. President, I must tell you, I am always impressed by the fact that the Barbados Police Service, I am always blown away by how quickly, maybe it's a function of how small Barbados is. The high rate of solving cases in Barbados is something that we have to not take for granted. We have to commend the Barbados Police Service and the members of the public who assist them in solving these cases. In 2023, Mr. President, we had 43 no guilty pleas and 44 convictions from the Barbados Police Service. We had a total of 56 convictions in 2023. This is for cases involving firearms or ammunition. In the case, Mr. President, I'm going to come to that same number in 2024, 2025. We also saw the police solving an equivalent number of those cases. 28 cases where they pled guilty, 32 where there were convictions in court. And then that number goes on, Mr. President, and we can see what the numbers are broken down to cover: possession, use of firearm and other offenses, use of firearm, murder, manslaughter, and the data for the Barbados Police Service is all there. They have been solving, as recently as the other couple of days, Mr. President, there was a stabbing. And yesterday I was able to see that as soon as the news was breaking that the person who passed away, and I want to extend condolences to all of the families who have been affected by these things, as soon as the nation was able to hear from the media that the person had passed, in the same news story, they also were able to say to the nation they had someone in custody. These are the circumstances, Mr. President, under which our police are engaging with members of the public, not in parties for the most part. That's not what they're here for, and I can say it now as well. I don't do kadooment. My pastor may probably have a connection if I did at this point in my life, but the fact of the matter is, Mr. President, on Kadooment Day, we have grown up in Barbados where we are used to seeing ladies beautifully attired, and they are dancing on police officers who are stoic and unmoving. But they're there. There's a period of time once Senator Monroe Knight launches the official season of Cropova, up until the time it ends, where the men and women of the Barbados Police Service can't take vacation. Vacation done. So all of the festivities and the activities that Barbadians are excited about and participate in, members of the Barbados Police Service, they can't. They can't get their vacation during that period. And so very recently, they sought to make the opportunity available for members of their police service. Because you know what? I'm going to say this here as well. We as Barbadians have to be very careful. We dehumanize people so many instances based on the functions that they have. We forget that politicians are people. We forget that policemen are real people. And so the things that we enjoy for ourselves, we grudge them for wanting for themselves too. So we don't see that they don't get to enjoy things in the same way that we do. We don't see that they don't get to enjoy vacations in July and in August, like half of the members of the public service who want in the private sector, who want to be able to enjoy their Cropova period. They're not real people, you know. They don't want to enjoy their own culture too. They have to stay in a corner because they're not real folks. So the fact that the police service sought to provide an opportunity for their members to have their own Kadooment, before the season gets started, we all of a sudden up in arms about it. Because they ain't real. They're not real men and women, they're not real Bajans, their citizenship is not real like ours is, and so they are not meant to do the things that we do. So serve and protect us only, but don't be human in your own right. Don't be Bajan in your own right. There's something very problematic about that thought process. We need to stop dehumanizing the people who work and serve on our behalf. We need to stop doing it. It's not a good thing. Now, were all of the members of the Barbados Police Service off the job in their carnival? Of course not. That's not even a logical thought process. That doesn't even make sense. It's not possible. The force was in force. They were still on the job. And those that were not, including, we have to remember, if I go through the same estimates of expenditure, you will be surprised to see how large some of these agencies are. Many people don't realize, when you see the Office of the Attorney General, underneath this department, this ministry, you have the Financial Services Commission, the Forensics Laboratory Team. You got the Office of the DPP, the Office of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel, the Office of the Solicitor General. You have the, I call it Forensic Sciences Center already. You have CID, you have the active police. You also have the administrative desk persons who support the work of the police. You have the registrars, you have all the administrative staff. These are all people, and they constitute the total body of the Office of the Attorney General. So why would we have a difficulty assuming that the persons who are on the street constitute the entirety of the apparatus of the Office of the Police, in this instance, including all of the administrative staff, you have the custodian staff, you have all the various persons, the IT people who are there because, you know what, they got computers too, so they got IT people. They were on the road too, Mr. President. But we having this grudging conversation about people who are Barbadians like us, enjoying themselves in the same way that we ourselves want to do. It is wrong. It is wrong. So the final thing that I want to say on this legislation Mr. President, is that there is meant to be a period of public communications. The Office of the Attorney General and the Police Service, and I believe a couple of other agencies, have already begun the process of meeting with and planning alongside the businesses that provide tint services to the public, so that you're not taken unawares by what the meters are supposed to be, which is why my mother could tell me that the man had a meter and could tell her it wasn't too dark, because the government got in front of the planning process and said, come, let us meet. Let us have a meeting with all of the people who do tint. The government looked at who had the darkest tints at the time, and they said, look, we ain't trying to make anybody get out of pocket. There has to be a period of sensitization, and so the implementation period would be on white date, and the communication period would run for X time to allow for people to be able to implement it and to give the opportunity for businesses not to lose revenue. So the government did not implement it willy-nilly. The government did not rush in and change the legislation without first getting the tint meters on island so that the police would know how to implement them. It has been carefully structured to allow for a transition period, to allow for businesses to come on board, to allow for police to be able to measure what they were looking at. But above all else, it is meant to keep our police and our security officials safe on the road as it relates to vehicles. It has nothing to do with what other measures may be taken in other areas. This is not a zero-sum game. This is in addition to all of the other things that I have outlined are being done, and the Honourable Attorney General outlined are being done in the other place when he spoke and in the public space. This is not just either or. This is along with, in addition to, plus, all of the things that this government, to account for $145 million in allocation to the Barbados Police Service, is investing in ensuring that the institution in this country that protects, from Senator Worrell to His Honor Mr. President, that they are able to be kept safe in the conduct of their course of doing business, and that as we call on them to protect us, when, God forbid, something happens, that they are positioned to do so, and to do so safely. And when the night comes and their shift ends, to go home to their families safely, because we want to disincentivize criminals from doing the wrong thing and to protect our officials from doing in the course of doing the right thing on our behalf, Mr. President. That is my submission to this honourable chamber, and I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Thank you, Senator Cummins. Senator Worrell.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I rise to make my contribution to this debate on the road traffic amendment. Now, Mr. President, this bill was introduced under a lot of fanfare, and it is unfortunate that a simple piece of legislation that you would have to do so much PR in terms of trying to make it right, which would suggest that if you need to do so much PR and so much corrections in order to make it right and to help people to understand the true context of the legislation, and to also go against the wide sentiment of many Barbadians that believe that it is not absolutely necessary, it may suggest that you may very well be out of touch with the concerns of the people of the country, and that you may need to review the piece of legislation that you are amending and you are bringing, and bring something more appropriate to address the concerns and the real needs of the citizens of the country. Now, it is not the average Barbadian that got the message out of context, but the truth is that the spin was put on this in the wrong way by the chief spokesperson for the government in a press conference to deal with crime, and coming out of that press conference, this was the only solution which was offered. And that chief spokesperson for the government, if the other members on the other side are unaware, was none less than the Prime Minister of Barbados and the leader of government in Barbados, the leader of the cabinet, who introduced the idea of the necessity to have tint legislation in Barbados as a part of the crime prevention strategy in none less than a press conference to deal with the increase in crime in this country. So for Barbadians to run away thinking that this was the government's sole method and solution to deal with crime, it is not their fault. It was introduced by the chief spokesperson for the government of Barbados, none other than the leader of the cabinet, the Prime Minister of this country. Introduced this in a press conference dealing with crime. So if Barbadians are of the impression that this tint legislation is the government's sole weapon in its arsenal to deal with crime, that misinterpretation was put by none other than the government itself and the chief spokesperson for the government, the Prime Minister of this country. So be that as it may, that this may have come from as a request from the police in terms of when they do a stop and search and the need to be able to see inside of vehicles, that was totally thrown out of the window and lost upon many persons. And it was also lost on many persons how tint will help to deal with crime in Barbados when, in majority of the situations, Barbadians are recognizing an escalating crime situations where people are driving on motorcycles and terrorizing neighborhoods. When people are going on foot and shooting up communities, including the death of an innocent 14-year-old, and they were not in vehicles with tint. They were not in vehicles with tint. So all of these are things that Barbadians are concerned about, and they would want to hear and see from the government of Barbados the introduction of more frontal policies that would actually address and deal with the escalating crime situation in Barbados. One such policy, I believe, could be the fact that the police need to be respected and that their orders and communications must be adhered to and carried out. And don't care who you are in Barbados, even if you have the telephone number of the Prime Minister, the Attorney General, a Minister of Government, you should not be able to call them and tell them that a police is interrupting your business and stopping you from doing your work, and then you hear that the police are not given their toll to back down from what they're doing. That is the situation that the police feel aggrieved about as well. But I did not see the government of Barbados rush to address that as they rush with haste to address one single concern, that we need to have a reduction in the level of tint on vehicles so that we can easily see into vehicles. Why not address that and the way how Barbadians respect the police, the authority of the police, and that recognize that if a police gives you an order, that you are required to follow that instruction, and that even I, as an opposition senator, can't change it for you, and therefore a Prime Minister should not be able to change it for you, Attorney General should not be able to step in and change that for you. Allow the police to carry out, follow the instructions and the order of the police and maintain law and order in this country. That is what the government should have come with. If the government had come today with that in some enforcing that, I'm certain that many Barbadians would get behind it and champion it. But instead, they come with something which they need to introduce a lot of PR and a lot of fluff in order to sell to the people of Barbados, when the people of Barbados have already decided, Mr. President, that they will have none of it. This speaks to a tone-deaf government which is not listening and it is not hearing the cries of the people of Barbados. The second issue with regard to this, when it was also introduced by the chief spokesperson for the government, They did a funny thing. I want money. Many Barbadians remember this. I want money. With the snapping of the hands and all, as though you are in a rum shop. I want money. That is what Barbadians remember when this piece of legislation was introduced as a crime-solving measure at a press conference dealing with the escalating increase in crime in Barbados. I want money. So you don't expect that Barbadians will take offense at it and see it as none other than a money grab? Because one, it will not change anything. Two, it just seems as a way of drawing the little bit of money out of the pockets of the people of Barbados by an authoritarian government. That is how Barbadians feel it, Mr. President. That is how Barbadians are seeing it. A government that has the majority of the seats in the House of Assembly, 29 seats, and therefore can pass any legislation which they feel like, because they know that there are no seats in the House, not enough seats in the House of Assembly, or either in this place that will change that. That is the situation in this country. So obviously, Mr. President, the people of Barbados will take offense against the legislation because they see it as a tax grab. I want money. Now, Mr. President, in coming to some of the aspects of the legislation, there are also issues in where the amendment and the regulation has been drafted, and issues with the amount of authority which have been prescribed to the minister with responsibility for the parent legislation, which is the road traffic, which in most cases would be the Minister of Transport and Works. It is believed that with this amendment, that it not only speaks to the actual portion of the regulation which deals with the tint, but it also has a bearing on all of the regulations and all of the offenses in the road traffic regulations, which I am not certain if many Barbadians recognize this, but the way how this is worded, it states 12.1A1, this section applies to such regulation as the minister may prescribe. So it means that the minister has the authority, because the regulations don't come to this place, they only don't come to this place for discussion, has the authority to pass regulations in the future where this $500 penalty may apply. Or the minister may say, this section applies to such regulations as the minister may prescribe. Going on to part 2, notwithstanding any other provisions of this act, the minister may by regulation prescribe the circumstances in which a person who through contravention of any regulation to which this section applies, any regulation to which this section applies, commits an offense may be offered an opportunity to discharge any liability that would arise out of the conviction for the offense by payment of an initial penalty of $500. Now, Mr. President, that is the issue. It says any regulation to which this applies. It means that for a simple speeding ticket, if the minister so desires, he can apply this $500 penalty on to. For a simple offense as relates to not having appropriate windscreens and wipers on your windscreens, could be applied that penalty too. A broken tail light, that penalty could be applied too. A tail light that is not broken as in with the glass, and a tail light that is not working, that penalty can be applied too. So why are we giving a minister so much latitude in order to come at their whim and fancy to change regulations and also to add additional regulations onto this. It is not my drafting of it. I would consider that you go back to the drafters if this was not the intention, that it applies to all of the categories of the road traffic regulation. And there are many categories of the road traffic regulations to which it could apply. There are many categories, Mr. President, in which it could apply. So I'm thinking that this is giving the minister and it is giving the administration far too much authority in applying this $500 penalty on simple Barbadians. What are we doing in this country, Mr. President? It is giving too much latitude to the minister, and it could only be seen by the public as none other than a money grab, since we were told, we want money, I want money. Those were the words coming from the mouth of the Prime Minister of Barbados in that press conference to address the escalating crime situation in this country when this same tint legislation was introduced. And now we have an amendment which give free rein to the minister to apply this $500 penalty to any aspects of the regulations under the road traffic amendment. If that was not the intention before it is passed in this place, I would suggest that you go back to the drafters and have an appropriate amendment done to limit the capacity of the minister to apply this $500 penalty at whim and fancy to any area under this regulation as stated here in the amendment brought before us today, Mr. President. So on that, Mr. President, this is not worthy to be passed in this chamber today. If we want to hear the people of Barbados, if we want to recognize that the people of Barbados are not satisfied with this legislation. Mr. President, we could speak at length about the entire legislation, but it will not do anything to change the crime situation significantly in this country. The police also asked for greater access to community policing in Barbados. You're not seeing anything being done about that. Things like that would go much further in terms of addressing the crime situation in Barbados. And it's not coming from Senator Worrell, but it came from the National Task Force on Crime Prevention in Barbados, which is one of the recommendations that we need to increase community policing in this country so that the police have more police officers trained in community policing. Yes, we do have it. And so that the police will be able to develop relationships with persons in the communities, especially those at-risk communities, and help to bring about some lifestyle changing programs in those communities. When those programs are properly operational, you have the Police Boys Club in Bay Street. Why is it that only in Bay Street? Why couldn't we have an intervention which would see police boys clubs being set up in more communities across Barbados so that young people would have greater access to interacting with the police and benefit from the services of the police boys club? So you could have one in the north, you can have one in the east, you can have one in central Barbados, you can have one on the south and on the west coast. And that, Mr. President, I would say today that if the government had brought a resolution or legislation to increase the numbers of police sports clubs across Barbados so that you would have greater interaction, that would do more for the people of Barbados in terms of fighting crime in this country, because you will be dealing with it from the source. So the tint is not going to change it. The tint will do nothing about it. Since it was introduced, the crime has escalated. This week alone, or probably last week, you had a murder nearly every single day, Mr. President. And the legislation was introduced, so I don't see that it is deterring any criminals in Barbados. We can go on, Mr. President, with measures that would also help in terms of crime fighting, and I think that these are things that the police would want. The police have been asking for an increase in their numbers for a number of years. The number of police in the Barbados police force, because they don't have enough. And we are recognizing a situation where persons are joining, but they're quickly leaving the force as well, because the pay, as far as they're concerned, is not adequate. So you have a number of policemen who get the training, and then they seek better opportunities in other Caribbean countries such as Bermuda or Cayman Islands. So we are losing our police in this way because obviously the pay is not enough to keep them here. And if you can have a trained cadre of policemen coming up through the ranks, that you are able to fill all of the vacancies within the police force, especially in the specialist areas, it will go a long way in terms of crime prevention and also fighting crime in this country, far further than any tint legislation would go at this present time, Mr. President. So I'm certain that that is one of the recommendations made by the police force, but the government has turned a blind eye to it. They have been tone deaf to it. They have not heard it. They have not even responded
Mr. President,
to it.
I rise on a point of order.
What's my order?
The honourable member is misleading the House. The honourable member, Mr. President, is sitting in a space where the police service has asked for many of these things under his administration and were ignored. This administration, however, has increased the number of persons allocated to the police service, including the number of persons who can be recruited. They have increased the allocation to the Barbados Police Service. They have increased the salaries 3 times in the last 8 years. They have also provided for provisions for island constables. So it is disingenuous for a member of the Democratic Labour Party that decimated the Barbados Police Service to attempt to attribute to us that which is really rightfully belonging only to the members of the Democratic Labour Party.
Please proceed, Senator Honourable.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I continue, Mr. President. Breathalyzer testing. Now, the government, in order to introduce this legislation and to make it work, the government spent money to bring into Barbados the equipment to test the level of tint on the vehicles. This was mentioned by Senator Cummins in her introduction. But yet still to this day, we cannot have breathalyzer testing being done in Barbados on any regular basis. Why haven't we spent the money in terms of bringing in that equipment as well? That would also help in terms of reducing the number of accidents on our roads, especially around periods such as crop over, where people are more likely to go out, enjoy a few drinks, and then attempt to drive back home. If the government was really serious and expected us to believe that this piece of legislation was introduced simply because of the requests and the needs of the police service and the people of Barbados, we would also have today breathalyzer testing in this country. Because the same way that you can spend money to bring in the equipment to test the level of tint on the windscreens, you could have also purchased the equipment and outfit the police with the equipment to do breathalyzer testing in this country. I have heard nothing from the government in terms of restricting the importation of the tint, which they believe to be too dark to be placed on vehicles. I would think that would have been a more proactive approach in terms of dealing with the legislation, because we don't manufacture the tint in Barbados as far as I know. The minister responsible for industry and innovation might be in a better position to answer that question whenever he gets around to speaking to the public of Barbados on matters relating to his ministry, Mr. President. But perhaps he can let us know whether or not we manufacture the tint in Barbados. If we don't manufacture the tint in Barbados, therefore we can place restrictions on the tint that is imported into the country. So those are things that would help in terms, it would go a long way of helping the police and it will go a long way in terms of maintaining the law and order. So perhaps these things can be done in conjunction. So instead of just looking to place the heavy fine, you can also put the proactive measures in place so that the taint, that is the wrong thing, cannot be imported, and therefore it would not be available for use in Barbados in the first place. All of these things can be done, Mr. President. But the issue and the reason why this government is fighting so much, Mr. President, and knocking all over the place is because Barbadians have woken up to the realization that this administration does not have the first clue as to what needs to be done to fight crime in this country. And that has broken the hearts of many Barbadians and left them fearful, including the elderly in this country, Mr. President, who woke up to the news on Sunday morning reading the leading newspaper about the rape of an elderly person in Barbados, in her house, in the precincts of her household. And it had nothing to do with it, Mr. President. But Barbadians are recognizing that the level of crime in this country is out of hand. But this government is not coming with any of the proactive measures necessary in order to fight crime in this country. All we are seeing every single week, a different murder, a different shooting, a different stabbing, robberies all over that have businesses fearful of opening after a certain period of time. Tint will not solve or address any of that. Those are the bread and butter, kitchen table issues that Barbadians would like to hear being addressed by this administration. And if they would do what they were elected to do and address these issues, they would not have to come here in this Senate chamber today to launch a PR campaign just to launch a misguided and unwanted and an unnecessary piece of legislation that will do nothing to change the situation for the people of Barbados, that will not make the elderly feel any less fearful during the day that they will pull down their windows and lock their doors and not answer a single call unless they know who is coming to their house. That will not do anything for women driving along dark roads at night, that they will lock their doors, roll up their windows, and if the police or any police vehicle come behind them, that they will drive to a lighted community before they stop the vehicle to allow the policeman to peer in. That is the level of the crime situation in this country, because people are being attacked on the roads and their vehicles are being stolen at night. You cannot go out in this country without the risk of robbery, the risk of loss of property, and the risk of loss of life, and yet you can come to me today and expect me to believe that a tint legislation, which is a worthless piece of legislation, not even worth the paper which it has been printed on, will do something to address the crime situation in this country. Get real. That is what the people of Barbados are asking for the Mayor Motley-led government to get real. It is not all about money, because money is causing the problem in crime situation in the first place. And for the government to go out on a platform, we want money, the criminals want money too. And that is why the crime situation in this country is spiraling out of hand. So don't come to us today on this sanctimonious platform thinking that you're doing something for the people of Barbados when really and truly you are not. You have no moral authority in this country to speak about crime in this country, because you have allowed the crime situation in this country to gallop way ahead of you. And I do not think that you have the moral authority, you don't have the ideas, you don't have the wisdom to pull it back. So I will say to you today, this is a worthless piece of legislation, and it is a waste of the time of the people of Barbados. And the police time could be better spent addressing actual issues that would fight crime in this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Worrell.
Any speakers?
Senator Dr. Drakes.
Google will invite. See you.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon to the Chamber and
all of those persons who can hear my voice. Mr. President, I rise this afternoon because this bill is connected to an issue that I will admit pains me deeply. And I will say why in my presentation. There are people who would say that the crime situation is getting out of hand. Barbados needs to be pulled back, and we are witnessing the decay of our society. And sir, I join them. We are facing a crisis in this country as it relates to crime. Anybody who lived in Barbados 15, 20 years ago could not fathom what we are experiencing now. They would say, man, you like, not Barbados. But because it has happened so often, so frequent, in a very short space of time, we have desensitized ourselves to cope with what is happening around us. And what we're also doing is saying, but other people are bad too. The crime is out of control in other places in the Caribbean. We are not as bad. That is now the benchmark. And that cannot be the benchmark in a place that is 166 square miles. There is no place to run, and there is no place to hide. There is no difference between what is happening in the lower income neighborhoods versus what people call the heights and the terraces. It is spreading, Mr. President. This piece of legislation, as I said, it pains me because as much as I listened with great intent to the leader of government business, stating it is a request from the police, and I congratulate the government, give the police all of the necessary measures to fight crime, to protect themselves. But what this piece of legislation also does, and this is a warning to the government, Mr. President, I am telling them, it makes you look soft on crime. This piece of legislation, as much as it is to assist the police force, makes the government appear soft on crime. Mr. President, you know why I say that? Just recently, this honorable chamber passed an amendment to the Bail Act, and that was a crime prevention measure. That was a crime prevention measure. And yet still, how many gun-related murders we've had this year alone? It has escalated since that amendment was passed. Mr. President, we have a situation where we are dealing with an element of our society of individuals and persons who are bold and brazen with their actions. They don't care who they harm, who is around. It could be somebody's grandmother, it could be children. And the same effort that they are putting into terrorizing this country, the government at least has to appear as though they are wrestling those individuals and the crime that they're perpetuating across this country. Because anything less than that emboldens criminals. They're not taking what we're saying here serious. They could care less. So the guys that toting guns, you think they're worried about what we're discussing in here today? They weren't worried about the amendment to the Bail Act, and that had a direct consequence to their activities, and they carried on. So we have to be careful how we disseminate and how we speak to the citizens of this country in the context where people are fearful. Mr. President, and I want to say this publicly because I heard an honourable member of this chamber on a political platform dismissing the fear that is in this country. Mr. President, I can tell you this. I am fearful in my own home. And I'm not fearful because somebody told me to be fearful. Less than 500 meters away from my house, there was a shooting. So somebody can't come and tell me not to be fearful because I experienced it. In addition to that shooting, I've been in close proximity to somebody who has been shot. So this is not a joke for me. I understand the ramifications after the person has been shot. You got to care for them. This is not a joke for families. So when people come and tell you how you should feel about a situation that you know personally, financially, emotionally, psychologically, the trauma it inflicts, it is insulting, Mr. President. And then every day you have to get up and hear on the news, somebody gets shot this place, somebody gets shot the next place. And you relive it, Mr. President, and you understand what that family is going through of the victim. Mr. President, we cannot continue in this vein, and I will say this, we cannot play politics with this issue. Because while we passing the buck to and for, the criminals running wild in this country. Mr. President, I have a lot of things to say, but I want to go to two things because I don't want, there are a lot of things we can say about data, crime prevention strategy, what it should entail. There are a number of efforts happening. And sir, forgive me if I'm getting a little impassioned, but there are two major issues that I want to put on the table in this discussion today. Because if we don't address them, there's nothing that we can do in this country that will solve the crime that we are seeing. The first, Mr. President, and it is going to be a difficult thing to solve and address, and the government cannot do it alone, and that is the breakdown of the family unit in Barbados. We have too many households in this country where parents are abdicating their responsibility for child rearing. They want the teachers to do it. They want the church to do it. They want the general society to do it. They want the government to do it. Not realizing it is their primary responsibility to instill the morals and the values in their children. There's some, yes, grow up in a household where the parents try their best and I empathize with those parents. But there are too many instances where parents are actually perpetuating the bad behavior in this country and then expecting somebody else to deal with it. It cannot work. And I don't know how the government intends to deal with that particular issue, but it is the source and the root of what we are talking about as it relates to crime prevention and where we are as a country in terms of this crime crisis. And Mr. President, within that breakdown of the household and the family unit, that's one layer, but we gotta go deeper now. The other layer to that is addressing the dysfunctional relationship between adults in this country as it relates to sexual and romantic relationships. Because the children who are born out of that dysfunction are the product of what we have in our society today. And I know that's going to be an uncomfortable topic because there's some norms that we are accustomed to that we say, man, that's how he is, that's how she is. But the byproduct of that, Mr. President, are children who do not have the safe, supportive, and loving environment that they should have because they're being passed around from house to house, some of them being abused, and what you then see as a product of that are people who cannot function in our society, because sometimes it is not a case that somebody wants to go on a block, you know. It's because the amount of confusion and dysfunction that is happening in the house. They run to the block. They find safe haven on the blocks. Because the mother, the father, and whoever else that live in the house behaving as though they ain't got no sense. No, I'm keeping it real today. They're behaving as though they ain't got no sense. All hours of the morning, cursing, carrying on. Children can't do their schoolwork. I am telling you, Mr. President, the root of this problem exists in our homes. Mr. President, the second root, and the leader of government business mentioned it, indiscipline. For some reason, in all of our modernization and trying to keep up with the rest of the world and becoming, we're punching above our weight and all these other things, the standards that we are accustomed to have completely eroded. When I was growing up, Mr. President, you could not pass an adult on the road and don't say good morning or good evening. Who you think you are? You have children now that curse you. If you say to them, well, young man or young woman, that's not the way to behave, Mr. President, they will curse you in their school clothes. We have to address these areas because at the heart of this problem are these issues of indiscipline in the schools, on our roads, as the leader of government business said. I came here this morning, Mr. President, and I saw about 3 or 4 infractions. Red lights being ran, people on the wrong side of the road. If you just look at how drivers behave on our roads, it is a clear indication that Bajans behaving how they feel like. If you are at a major stop and you take too long just because you want to be sure that a car is not coming up on your left, they're blowing your horn. The place is only 166 square miles. You can't drive from New York to LA and Barbados. So if it takes me 2 seconds just to make sure the road is clear, I have somebody behind me cursing me. And Lord forbid, if you are at a junction trying to get out, somebody is calling you out and you don't come out fast enough, they're cursing you then too. In their goodwill, they find a way to curse you then. Mr. President, what is happening in Barbados? I want us Barbadians to really ask the question, what are we doing as a society? Because we blame the children, but yet when you look at the adults and the behavior, they are just as indisciplined as the children. Mr. President, in a society where people do not respect law and order, there will be anarchy. It is as simple as that. And why I am pleading with both Barbadians and the government, because the government cannot do it alone. We can have all the fancy plans in the world, all the best economic policies, growth projections, sustainable development policies, blue-green economy, creative industries, we gather in. Mr. President. But you see, if we do not get this under control, this is an immediate and present danger to the fabric of our society. So, Mr. President, if this bill has come before the House at the request of the police, by all means, facilitate it. The government has my support in that, because I believe the police need the necessary measures to be protected when they go on the street to keep us safe. But at the same time, I want the government to know the messaging around this made the government appear soft on crime. And we cannot be soft on crime, Mr. President. People are shooting in broad daylight, shooting in shopping malls. Mr. President, it is as though people believe within the criminal element, they are not the ones who run Barbados. And we have to ask the question, how did we get here? And everybody has to answer that question. Because if the Bail Act, as I said, the amendment to the Bail Act did not act as a deterrent, the government has to ensure that any messaging and any policy measures going forward makes the government, even if it is in appearance, seem tough and strong on crime prevention. Because, Mr. President, I'm going to tell you this. When citizens do not feel safe, when the average person feels as though they don't have any protection, you know what happens? Vigilante justice. You are going to see the average person start arming themselves because of the fear that they feel walking around in this country. And that is a place we do not want to go. Mr. President, I am not a criminologist. I'm not a sociologist, but clearly we need a stronger policy on crime prevention. I do not know what it will entail, but I am hoping that the government, in short order, they have press conferences often, speak to this issue in a forceful and meaningful way that will allow us as citizens to feel as though something is being done to combat what is happening out on our streets. And with those few words, Mr. President, I'm obliged to you.
Thank you very much, Senator Dr. Drakes. Senator the Reverend Charles Morris.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I stand to give my support to this amendment that stands here before us this evening. And I want to say, in fact, give my unequivocal support to the issue of the reduction of tint on our car windows or vehicle windows. But sir, in fact, the recommendations that I've heard, except for some by Senator Drakes, in dealing with crime, especially the ones, the suggestions coming from the opposition senator, all of these come after crimes have been committed, not before. The issue is to get crime, to solve the matter of crime before the crime happens. I also want to say, as a sociologist, I study sociology, history. I like to begin my speeches, sir, seek in theory. And there is a theory called the broken window theory. It was developed by George Keller and James Wilson. And to put it simple, if you pass and see a window broken and it is not fixed, sometime later you pass and you see another window broken, and then later other windows are broken. Sooner or later the whole house is ransacked. And when we apply that to crime, sir, if we do not nip crime when it raises its head, it gets worse. So, and that is what is happening. Fix the broken window. That's what we need to do. And how do we do this? I am not going to follow those who say that the tint solves crime. It will not solve crime. As a matter of fact, we've had the issue of tint in the traffic management bill sometime before. I believe it is still there, and it is just being amended. But tint is not going to solve crime any more than shutting people out of their church service. Tint is not going to solve crime anymore, and sir, I'm going to be brutally frank today. It is not going to solve crime anymore than holding a fake press conference. It is not going to solve crime anymore than sponsoring a football team with bread, and when you lose the election, you call back for the bread. I'm brutally frank today, sir. You know, Alexander the Great said, an army of sheep led by a lion will defeat an army of lions led by a sheep. That's what Alexander the Great said. And I do not believe that this country is about to allow itself to be led by a sheep. What is the issue, sir? The issue is, and I've heard the opposition senator talk about what the government has done and has not done. 22 murders for the year so far, 13 have been by firearms. And when we look, in fact, there was a stabbing some recently as well. But the police have charged most of these persons or have the suspects in custody. That's the first thing. And I'm saying that the attempts that we use right now are after the crime. Look and see what has been done. The number of judges doing criminal trials have been increased from 2 under the last administration to 8. There were only 2 judges doing criminal matters under the last administration. Now it's gone up to 8. Since 2018, the number of the attorneys in the DPP's office has increased from 8 prosecutors to 20 prosecutors. An enormous improvement in dealing with criminal matters in the high courts. Like when you see, in the 18-month period, commencing January 2023 and ending June 2024, 584 indictable matters were disposed of. 67 of them were murder, sir. Let it be, the opposition center mentioned the Bela. yes, there has been legislation to deal with that, a new bail act, sir. Plea bargaining, trial by judge alone trials. $145 million voted for the police for this financial year from 111 in 2018. So all of these things have been done, but yet they do not see the police doing or the government doing anything. But a lot of it happens after the crime has been committed. So in terms of the traffic, let us look at the road. We still have speeding on the roads. We still have speeding on the road. And we have these people with the tents driving around and shooting at people. And the police are saying, look, we cannot see in the cars. Some of them driving with the tents, dark tents, in the back seat of the cars. What I do not agree with, sir, is the fine. Because I'm told that the fine is $500. If it is, it's $500 and $10 every, if you miss it. I believe it should be doubled, sir. If you miss it, $500. That's what happened in places like England. And let me tell you something, sir. There are countries, all the countries in the world I know about now have their thing. The 10 laws. So the deputy commissioner and then going to park his car, or the chauffeur park his car in front of his residence. And the traffic warden put a ticket on it. Nobody questions that. I mean, we had to make the necessary call to the traffic warden, to the office, because work was going on at the house. So we couldn't park any place else. But these fines are paid or you lose your vehicle. Look at the road, how we travel. The ZRs and the minibuses, sir. No respect at all on the roads. When they're not speeding, they're not stopping at the bus poles. Even this morning on my way here, a ZR van got the whole road blocked up because he's looking for passengers. Fix the broken windows, sir. Deal with the infractions on the highways. And don't talk about if you have two minibuses or ZRs coming in different directions. They stop and they form conversations. Fix the broken windows. Motorcyclists on the road, sir. Not only are they speeding, but sometimes I wonder if any of the wheels are on the road. Because the first time I can see motorcycles riding or somebody riding a motorcycle in a horizontal position is happening in this country. Fix the broken windows. But there's more to it, sir. There's more to it. People are making light of what the PM said. And honesty determines that we should be frank and look at the context in which it was said. Because we're all omitting the context. I never got the impression that the Prime Minister was asking for money. I never got that impression. What? She was saying that she did not want to lock up anybody? How many countries in this world do people get locked up for traffic infractions? How many? But there's a level of hypocrisy going on in this country, and I'm going to be brutally frank about this. We look at the schools, there's violence. We look at some of these unions that are associated with the Democratic Labour Party, who themselves have encouraged violence. And I want to make a plea here now, sir, that how could any person in charge of the national organization be the subject of criminal activity. And therefore, I'm speaking frankly. I am calling on the president of C2SAB to resign his position because he is a subject of criminal activity.
Senator Morris, you cannot go there, sir. Please withdraw and move on.
Withdraw, sir. Those who are involved, withdraw, sir. Withdraw.
I urge you to speak to matters of policy.
Yes, sir. I'm
concerning
speaking to
legislation,
sir, but when
and not in relation to particular individuals or offices. Please.
Sir, when we have individuals who are who show signs of being aligned with criminal activity, what is that saying to our young people? What is it saying?
We would love to hear that from you.
You understand? Sir, I am saying, sir, that there is a level of hypocrisy in this country regarding crime.
That's right.
That's my contention. And it's coming from a lot of persons who support the Democratic Labour Party.
I'm mentioning that you're next part.
In the schools, sir, in the schools, do you know why we have problems in the schools?
On a point of order, Mr. President,
Yes, what's the point of order?
I believe that the senators should withdraw that comment with regard to the Democratic Labour Party and linking persons linked to the Democratic Labour Party with crime.
So you told me don't call names, so I would not call anybody's name in here.
Yes, but I also would want you not to, with a broad brush, smear institutions either. I think that in the spirit of the debate, you should withdraw the comment and move on.
Withdraw, sir. Withdraw. Sir, let us look at the schools and why we have so much criminal. Huh? I said withdraw. I withdraw, sir.
Please proceed.
Yes, sir. Sir, let's look at the schools. Do you know why we have so much indiscipline in schools, sir? Let's go back to what happened. And I was a teacher. I was also first vice president of the Secondary Teachers Union. So therefore, I faced it head on. Sir, there was a time when we had experienced teachers in our schools who did not have master's degrees. But they were experienced and they were able to control schools. Some of them acted, in fact, some of them were principals without a master's degree. Some of them were deputy principals without a master's degree. In one fell swoop, sir, the legislation was changed, and it was changed and effective immediately. That the qualifications for principal and deputy principal was a master's degree. And a lot of persons who did not have master's degrees at that time, a lot of them, sir, were removed from those positions. But when they removed that, especially those who were active. And they were replaced with teachers who had less than 10 years experience, and some of them were principals and deputy principals. In other words, those with the experience and the know-how to rule the schools were not principals or deputy principals. In fact, they were not even given the opportunity to get qualified, as was done during the time, I think it was 1978, around there, when the then Prime Minister Tom Adams, when they wanted to raise the bar for the qualifications, the Ministry of Education allowed those teachers to get qualified. And therefore we had in the schools the teachers with experience. They were there. what is even more, sir, is that since that new legislation came in with the qualifications, a lot of them had to back out. But what is more, some of those teachers that wanted to get qualified, by that time, they wanted to go to university, do their masters. That was the time when the students then had to pay tuition fees at the university. And it was as if the parents vicariously allowed their children to go and get their degrees, and they did without the masters, so to promote themselves. From then on, sir, there was chaos in our schools, because we have many schools with principals and leaders. And I'm speaking from experience, sir. From what I saw, who could not control a classroom of one person now cannot control a classroom. How do you expect them to control a classroom of 1,000 people? And I am saying, sir, the schools keep in chaos from then on. Although there are other factors as well. There are other factors as well. And what do we have? Senator Dress mentioned it. That what we are doing is outsourcing our children from a very early age. So from 5 or 6 years old, 6 months old, the children go to their nursery. Then they go to the pre-primary or whatever it is. Then they're always in school. Our children are passed on to some person else. And they have a serious problem, sir, with what is going on. Yes, it is true. How many of I have said in here already, sir, too many of our children in the school, sir, are suffering from sexual relationships with their seniors, as teachers. And some of them becoming pregnant. And when you become, as a female, when you become pregnant in school, that is it for you. Believe it or not. That is it. And we have, sir, to stop playing the politics with this issue of crime. What do we do? Fix the broken window. All these methods that I heard Senator Warren mention come after the fact. So, one of the things that presents itself is, and they're constantly doing it, is the common entrance examination. Too many of our students in the schools are left outside the circle when it comes to that. And a lot of them are taking on criminal activity. When we look around, see so many of our children, over 2,000 every year, who feel that they're left out of a system. That is a cause for concern. Yet, we do not want that those who are opposing educational transformation, one that includes all, one that gives everybody the benefit of a benefit to move on. So that needs to be addressed. The other thing is, what the government is doing too, is that the government has a lot of programs going on. I think one is Coursera, and the other one is ITI. All of these are free, and some of our children should be coaxed into doing these kind of programs. So don't ask what the government is doing. We also have to ask what we are doing, because it's a sociological problem. However you look at it, it is a sociological problem. And therefore, sir, rather than looking for solutions after the crime has been committed, because, sir, when we consider and I've heard it on every call-in program. I've heard it even in here. I've heard it all over the place. The strategy to deal with crime is to do this, is to do the next, and to do this, and all of it happens after. We need strategies to deal with the persons before they commit crimes. That's what we need to do. And then when we look around and see institutions doing things that are questionable, doing things that are not lifting up a population, then that is a cause for concern. So we can do all of these, we can do almost everything. Everything we can do. But we can blame the schools, we can blame the government, as that is the thing. And the thing is that everybody in Barbados now do not want to accept responsibility. But you know this was from creation. You know this was from creation, sir. Not creation story about Adam and Eve. It was accepting responsibility. Being accountable. Not with nobody eating an apple and all kind of foolishness, sir. It is about accountability. Not me, it is the government. Not the government, it is the international institutions. So we continue to blame and blame. So it's the criminal now in Barbados, oh, the government, as though the government lives in the house with these persons. And you heard Senator Drexler mention all those things that go on in the house. We mentioned all of them, we've heard all of them. The time has come for us to, you know what, look inward sometimes. What can I do to solve the problem in this country? What can I do? What can you do, sir? What can Senator World do? What can all of us in here do? What can the wider community do to assist in this problem? But we are blaming hither, thither, and yon. And we have people in our society, sir, that are perpetuating this crime that all can see. So when they say so, if there's one thing nobody accuses me of, it's telling a lie. They may call me other things. And the most of them is controversial. Huh? Or they call me controversial. They call me out, but they cannot call me a liar. And that means, therefore, that there's trust. When you are honest with people, people trust you. And therefore, sir, with these few controversial words, I wish to say to you, let us fix the broken window. Fix the broken window. I believe, sir, that even though there may be criticism of that theory, fix the broken window. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Reverend Charles Morris. Senator Kevin Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just left another place where you had to preface your arguments with authorities. And in anticipation of certain rebuttals, I looked up an expression from a Roman statesman at the time, Cicero. And he had said, when you have no basis for your argument, you must attack the plaintiff. We call it ad hominem attacks. Do with that what you will, sir. I've listened to the narrative of the government. I've listened to the statements of said narrative by the opposition, and I've listened to the impassioned plea of my fellow independent Senator Driggs. And recognizing our role in this new republic to speak truth to power and attempt as much as possible to keep the debate within a balanced forum, I thought it prudent to perhaps bring things back to center with regard to what we're debating today. Now, sir, when I look at the legislation which we were provided with, and I say that deliberately, under objects and reasons, it says this bill would amend the Road Traffic Act, Cap 295, to empower the minister to prescribe the cases in which a person may discharge his liability for contravention of regulations made under the Act through the payment of a penalty administratively and the remediation of the contravention. In other words, as set out by the leader of government business, it allows you to render unto Caesar for any transgressions by way of a fine. Now, also as identified by the spokesman on behalf of the opposition, the concept of what fits within the realm of those regulations is not set in stone. So while we are today discussing regulations in relation to tint, those regulations can be expanded and or contracted, added to, and or divided. So perhaps we are having more of an esoteric approach, and maybe it's more of a narrative where we're saying, look, we're moving away from criminalizing certain aspects of road traffic issues to seeing how we can deal with these issues, but also utilizing a mechanism which allows there to be a pecuniary benefit to the state. In other words, you get money. Maybe that's it. And somehow this debate has taken on a national import by being attached to the issue of crime prevention. And I don't think that anyone listening or anyone in this chamber would doubt the ability of this government to shape a narrative. I don't think any of us would not recognize the skill at which these matters are handled. So there is obviously a purpose for what we're doing and a reason. And what is that? Sir, as echoed by the independent senator who spoke before me, there is a serious concern about crime. I think that goes without saying. I have noted with interest the statements, as just said by the speaker from the government side, that is a sociological issue. In my view, sir, and this is just me, the same way that you take the kudos, you take the blows. In other words, you win some and you lose some. The government can say that we ought to be commended for our progress with regard to the economy. By the same token, the opposition ought to be able to say the government should be condemned with regard to the crime situation. In my mind, you can't have it both ways. The attempt at what we're doing is to have a debate, though, about this piece of legislation and how we encompass these different perspectives. Crime and violence, sir, was a political rallying cry that was decried when it was first made. The same way when the current Prime Minister raised the issue of CLICO and insurance regulation, it was decried. And what we see here in this chamber is that what starts off, I think there's a statement about the first time an idea is made is ridiculed, then is accepted, and then is lauded. What starts out being something that's jeered and mocked, after a while, suddenly becomes accepted as a truism. What we're dealing with, though, is the current reality. The issue of tint, to me, is a non-issue. If the government wants to regulate tint, regulate tint. That's within the ambit. You were given that mandate by the populace of Barbados. if it is stated that the police want the reduction of the tint to allow the crime prevention efforts, there is no red blood Bajan who has an issue with that. We are still at the core a society which derives itself from a plantocracy in a situation where people will tell you if the police come wrong here, what you are doing for them to come wrong here. So we still have that built in. So I don't think anybody has an issue with regard to the tint or the government or the police saying that this is necessary to prevent crime. I think what the issue is, Mr. President, is that it has become conflated, and it then presents a scenario where if it is said that crime is a sociological or familial or else some other type of issue which is outside of the remit, it then causes that conflict of ideologic. What are you doing? How is this responsible? Why are you not dealing with it? For me, sir, I'm limited in my contribution to the road traffic issues. If we're talking about the Road Traffic Act, we should be talking about some of the issues which continue to plague all of us in relation to road traffic. We passed legislation to allow the inspectors on the minibuses, correct, sir? Sorry, I shouldn't be questioning you. We passed, Mr. President, you will recall, I just left another place. You will recall, Mr. President, that we passed regulation to allow inspectors on the minibuses. Has there been any data provided to see what fruits that has borne? Has there been improvement in terms of the conduct? What are the continued steps and pressures that we need to put on the ZRs? It is quite clear that they continue to do as they like. You can't talk about road traffic without dealing with that. And I've heard other speakers mention it. Sir, we cannot talk about road traffic without talking about the situation of the congestion which occurs outside of fast food places, especially in Oystons, when people stop to go and line up and buy their fast food, which should be an issue for all of us. There's a previous champion who was here, but she's no longer here, where people stop to line up to go and buy the fast food and block the road. And it leads to congestions. And the owners of the fast food establishments, is there responsibility on them? I don't know. Is there responsibility on the persons who are waiting to get in and block up the road? I don't know. But these are the type of issues that we have to deal with. Sir, we cannot talk about road traffic issues without dealing with the potholes. I traverse the road, I shouldn't be telling tales if we're talking about crime and things, but I traverse the road between Bannatynes and St. David's almost daily. And sir, I'm not a speeder, I'm a cruiser. And they have fellas who come in on that road seeking to avoid the potholes / transitory inconveniences, which is a term which was attributed to a former prime minister, which is actually a legal term. Justice Hoffman was describing it, sir. But I digress. Persons, when you're driving through these back roads, swerve to avoid the potholes and could lick you up. Yeah. We can't talk about road traffic without dealing with these issues. So while there's this whole debate about tint and road traffic, these are some of the pressing issues which the public of Barbados continue to face. So let's give the government all the support they need, and I would encourage the government deal with this. This is low-hanging fruit. I don't think there's any Barbadian who would have an issue if there's a clamp down on these ZRs. I ain't asking you. I tell you. I don't think there's any Barbadian who would have an issue dealing with the congestion or dealing with the issue of potholes. So we could deal with tint, no issue, but let's deal with all these other things as well. But in terms of the tint, sir, my statement is this. The enforcement of the regulation has to be properly managed. The machines that the police officers will be given have to be properly distributed and regulated, and the training. Because we are going, I'm not asking you, sir, we are going to have issues when it's rolled out with how it's measured, who doing the measurement, what angle you doing the measurement, if the machine was calibrated, I am not asking you, sir, I'm telling you past experience. Right now is an eye test where you come out by the junction, you see the gentleman waiting for you to see who's doing their rolling stock, you get pulled over and you get your indication. The ability to check, to ensure that it's done properly, sir, is key. The government says it will be doing an educational program. we will see, sir. But in terms of the regulations themselves, which were circulated, I have some suggestions to make. We've heard today the government speakers lauding the efforts of the judiciary and the prosecutors in terms of dealing with crime. However, the regulations which we have been provided indicate that the persons who are exempt from the tint regulations, that is, the persons who are allowed to keep their tint, currently stand as the President, the Prime Minister, Defense Force, prison personnel, and other persons who have submitted the necessary medical qualifications to do so. There should be consideration, I say, sir, for the Attorney General, which is not in what I have seen, the Chief Justice, which is not in what I have seen, the 8 judges who we just referred to, who are supposed to be dealing with the criminal backlog, they're not listed in there, or the other judges, heaven forbid, who have to deal with all these situations with debtors and jealous spouses and all the myriad of issues that judges have to deal with, nor is there provision for the prosecutors. If there is a safety concern, which is why, or a national security concern, which was why we have President PM, certainly the Chief Justice, the Attorney General, judges and prosecutors should be included in this list, because these are the persons who are on the front line. I know you can talk about senators and MPs, sir. Nobody deals with that. We know we'll get through. We'll break for ourselves, sir. But in all, bringing it back to the center, the debate is supposed to be about the road traffic and the issue of the tint. The debate in terms of the legislation speaks to discharging liability for contraventions of regulations under the Road Traffic Act and the payment of penalties, that is money, to remediate the same. I've said what I have to say, and I thank you for the opportunity to do so, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Kevin Boyce. If no other speakers, Senator Cummins.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'd like to, as usual, thank all of the honourable members who have spoken. And I want to take the opportunity to revisit a particular press conference where, in that press conference, the Honourable Prime Minister, the Leader of Cabinet, the Leader of Government, spoke about a number of things, including the creation of what she termed at the time Citizen Advisory Council. She identified the various elements within our society and our community where crime can impact, has impacted, and needs to be involved in finding solutions. I believe at the time that the Honourable Prime Minister spoke, she spoke then about ensuring that we have an all of Barbados approach to crime solving. She made sure in that conversation as well that she said the issue of crime cannot be, must not be politicized. It is for that reason, Mr. President, that I did not pick a noise in my opening presentation, and I deliberately started to point out how much money this government has assigned in our annual estimates of expenditure to the Barbados Police Service since 2018. I deliberately, and I said so, did not go any further beyond 2018 because I sought not to politicize this issue until I had to respond. But because at that time in the press conference, the Prime Minister pulled together citizens and representatives from diverse parts of the country, teachers, community activists, business people, law enforcement, and persons who, as one Barbados, could come together and find common solutions to a common problem. She said so in that press conference, Mr. President. She said at the time publicly that because she did not want to politicize this matter, she wanted also to invite a representative of the opposition to sit on this because it ought not to have been politicized. To date, that offer has not been taken up. And she's been very clear on these things. There are certain issues, whether it is education, transformation, if it is on matters relating to crime, that we as a people have to tackle the solutions together. They're not to be sacrificed at the altar of political expediency. And I want to take the opportunity then today to call on the members who were invited to take up their seats on the Citizen Advisory Council, who have to date not done so, or designated a representative, to come and be a part of the solution and stop shouting across the way at the government about what everyone else should do. Come and be a part of the solution. If I remember correctly, Mr. President, I remember, because there's precedent for this, when we were having economic issues in the pre-2018-ish era, the then leader of the opposition, as she was then, called on the government to establish what she described as a council of elders to solve the fiscal and the financial and economic problems that Barbados was facing. Even in opposition, she felt that there were certain issues that ought not to be politicized. And as an opposition leader, she wanted to participate. And she said, we are willing to sit with you and to bring together the wise men from all over, wherever they are, and to agree on commonly found solutions for our country, not some and not others, for our country. And as Prime Minister, she did the same thing with the Citizens Advisory Council. In this honourable chamber, I believe that there are a few of us who have served in this chamber since 2018. We also remember that there have been sessions where we have come with the Attorney General, with the Commissioner of Police, as he was back in 2018, and we had full presentations to the Senate members on issues relating to crime, Mr. President, and on issues relating to legislative amendments, specifically those that required a 2/3 majority. We have always taken a consultative posture and an all-embracing posture on certain matters, and crime is at the top of that list. Let those who have ears hear. Whether it is in opposition or in government, there is a way to conduct the affairs of men that does not reject the idea that there must be an approach to Barbados that sends a message to those who we lead that solutions are not found in the bosom of others, but they're found in our own bosom, collectively and together on key issues that affect us. Now, Mr. President, I want to take just a few moments to respond to some of the queries that were raised by the honourable members. Now, Senator Worrell raised a number of issues, and I agree with him on police orders being respected. In fact, in my own presentation, I opened by saying that we wanted to make sure that Barbadians understood that you have to respect the lawful orders of police. I opened by saying that I myself have witnessed that extensively over the last few days, especially about Barbadians completely disregarding. Senator Boyce, in his contribution, spoke about the behavior of ZRs, and we have come to this chamber and made many amendments to legislation, including road traffic amendments, to address the issues of indiscipline on our roads. So it is an issue that all of us can get behind readily. Now, Senator Worrell, in speaking about community engagement, raised the fact that we have the Police Boys and Girls Club on Bay Street and asked why these things did not happen elsewhere. Now, I'm glad that he asked that question because And it always happens, Mr. President, and it's really not intentional, Senator Paris, and I wear my Rotary pin with pride. But at that Boys and Girls Club, every Saturday for 12 weeks, I think it is, twice a year, we run a program in collaboration with the Juvenile Liaison Scheme, with the Barbados Police Service, and with the Probation Department. And all students, we have kids that come in from 9 up to teenage years, and they come in and they do programs if they are encountering the law already, if they've already started to get into trouble. Parents, there's a parental intervention component of that, because as Senator Morris and Senator Drake said, it starts in a home. Parents have to be involved. It is also why, under the government specifically, the police have indicated that there are a number of community engagement initiatives. There is a school liaison program, which is undertaken in collaboration with principals, teachers, guidance counselors, and it is being executed in primary and secondary schools to target at-risk youth. There have been a number of case conferences which have been convened by the Barbados Police Service. They have been included at several secondary schools, and I can see, I don't want to call the names of the schools here, but I can see at least 5 schools listed that the Barbados Police Service has hosted case management conferences. We are talking about road traffic, yes, and there is a program for road safety, and it is underway with the Barbados Police Service in primary schools across the country. There's a program called The Crossover. The Crossover is presented to Class 4 students in preparation for their transition from primary to secondary, and it focuses on a number of things, including decision-making, peer pressure, self-esteem building, and the age of criminal liability. The police is involved in all of these activities across the country, not just in Bay Street at the Boys and Girls Club. They also have, Mr. President, a reading day. This is something that they do. They go into the schools to build relationships with the kids. And I can see the schools that they're listed here. This initiative fosters literacy development, critical thinking, and student engagement, while also strengthening community relations between law enforcement and young learners. There's a specific program for the care of the elderly, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker. It talks about collaboration with various elderly care homes, where the community officers have been engaging and entertaining and partnering with persons in the elderly care community, and a special outreach to ensure that they have access to the persons who live alone in the elderly community. There is a business alert program. All of this is under the Barbados Police Service as community engagement, Mr. President. It was established in collaboration with the stakeholders and business owners to ensure that there is an enhancement of security awareness, and crime prevention strategies. There's youth outreach and intervention. There's the King's Trust program. There's the police enrichment time program, the crime prevention through environmental design program, and the list goes on. So just because we drive up Bay Street and we see the Boys and Girls Club, it does not mean that that is the only program that the Barbados Police Service is running in our communities. That is notwithstanding the outposts, that is notwithstanding the patrols that the police are undertaking. There are any number of activities that the Barbados Police Service is undertaking, Mr. President. So I want to assure Senator Worrell, through you, Mr. President, that there is so much more happening with community policing than that which we see at Bay Street. Senator Drake's presentation, there's very little, if anything, that Senator Drake said that I could take issue with. We want to ensure that we are sending the right messages to all segments of community. And the fact of the matter is, nobody can tell me how to feel, or you, in your own home, based on your lived experience. And the fact of the matter is, as much as the government has invested in the police service, in crime prevention, because there is an entire crime prevention program, as much as the government is investing in the One Family program to address the issues of sociology and family and community and dysfunction that has been raised, there are still these issues that will persist. And people have to be able to feel how they feel about it. And that's okay. And they have to be able to say how they feel about it. That's okay too, Mr. President. But I want to focus, just as I close, Mr. President, on the question of the family unit. I have a daughter, and I think I've said it in here before. It is not the responsibility of anybody to raise my child for me. It's my responsibility. If I am not a responsible parent, if I am not a parent that is setting an example, then my child will become a mirror of me when they go out into the community, when they walk down the road, when they go into somebody's classroom. Mr. President, I went to St. George Primary School. My mother worked at St. George Secondary School. My mother was a school secretary at St. George Secondary for all of my life. You know that I couldn't even get below a certain mark in my class because my teachers were going to complain to my mother. I would always be in trouble. I got more licks in primary school, never for bad behavior, but always for my work. And before I could get home, the teachers were calling my mother. That's the truth, because they work within each other, within the proximity of each other. If I stopped short on my way from St. George Primary School to St. George Secondary School, my mother would know. I never did, Mr. President. I was always a responsible student. But more importantly, by the time I became a parent, I told this story yesterday to one of my staff members. We were having a meeting. My daughter was probably around 14 in secondary school. And there was this child who had been bullying and taunting her for a long time. She was too great. She was too this. She thought she was too this. She thought she was too that. And every day, this child would terrorize my child. And one day it came to head. You know how children can be. And this girl was in her face. I don't let you, I don't let you feel use this. And my daughter told me that as she stood there with all of these children in her school cheering them on, because children want to see a fight, they want to see how she can respond. What she heard in her head was, my mother tell me, if the school ever call her down here for me, she gonna make me shame. That's what my child remembered. And it was at the time that Lil Rick had a song, I Like Myself. And my child said she remembered the song in that moment. And she said to the girl, don't let me, but I like myself. And she walked off, and the kids chanted, and they were quite excited. But she walked away, not because of anything other than the fact that the dominant voice in her head was her mother, who held her feet to the fire. Parents need to hold their children to the fire and be the dominant voice in their head positively. Not because you think that your parent will come and curse the teacher or beat the teacher or make a scene at the school. That is not parenting. Not because your parent is going to come and defend wrongdoing. Not because your parent is going to back you even when you're 100% wrong. Because those are the scenarios where if you don't learn right from wrong in your household and your parents don't hold you to account, no matter what legislation this government or any government puts in place, you will encounter the police at some point in time in life, and this is what we're trying to avoid, starting in our households. The idea has to be to stop children from having to encounter police unless something goes wrong. And when they have to call the police, they should have no difficulty with encountering the police because they have not run afoul of the law. That's really what we're here for. That's what we as leaders are responsible for. That's what we as professionals are here for. That's what we as business people, especially on the independent side, are here for. That's what we as doctors and lawyers and community leaders and advocates and priests are here for. That's what we as government are here for. That's what we as the opposition are here for. And that is what we as parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents, all are here for. That is the focus, Mr. President, of all of country crime prevention strategy. Today, what we're talking about is a road traffic amendment to ensure that we can lower the depth of tint on windows in vehicles to empower and to protect the police of this country in the execution of their duties and responsibilities. And it has been made at their request. If the police came and asked for additional equipment, as they have done, this government has responded in the affirmative. If the police came and said that we need to have more posts created because we are short on numbers, That's what this government has done. If the police came and asked, as they did, for the issues of special constables to be resolved, to help add value to what they're doing, then that is what this government did. If the police came and said that they wanted cameras in different areas so they could have policing and have eyes, that is what this government has done. This is what a government does when it is supporting the people who protect our people. This government is supporting the Barbados Police Service with this amendment, and not only do I commend this amendment to this chamber, but I commend it to all right-thinking Barbadians. I beg to move, Mr. President, that this bill now be read a second time.
Thank you, Senator Cummins. The question is that this bill be read a second time. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Your Honour do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do not leave the chair and the Honourable the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The Honourable the Senate is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Clause 1 do now stand part.
The question is that Clause 1 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Clause 2 do now stand part.
The question is that Clause 2 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that you do not report to His Honour the Chair, the President of the President, the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honour the President the passing of one bill in committee. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
The chairman has reported the passing of one bill in committee. Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, I beg to move this bill now be read a third time.
The question is that this bill be now read a third time. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Road Traffic Amendment Number 2 Act of 2025.
The question is that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Road Traffic Amendment Number 2 Act 2025. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is now passed and so cited.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this sitting of the Senate now be suspended for a lunch break and to reconvene at 2:45 p.m.
Just before I put the question about our break, just want to acknowledge two young visitors to our chamber, Ms. Lithcott and Ms. Cox. Welcome. Happy to have you. Hope you found our session interesting. Lynch and Cox. Lynch and...
Lithcott and Lynch.
Lithcott and Lynch. My apologies for getting your... And they are in service students they are still? Yes. Yes. Clark Gittins and former guest of Senator Kevin Boyce. They see the many dimensions of of their principle, as well as the many useful ways in which the study of the profession of law can be helpful in public policy and practice. And you can feel free to ignore some of the comments that are aside. Pay attention only to the official speaker at the time. So welcome. The question is that this sitting of the Senate be suspended until 2:45 p.m. today. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The next ayes have it. This sitting stands suspended until 2:45 p.m. today.